Welcome to Fertility Friendly Food. I'm your host, Stephanie Velakis, accredited practicing dietitian and nutritionist and director of The Dietologist, an Australian-based practice focused on optimizing fertility through nutrition. This podcast will bring you snack-size episodes for you to learn, grow, and be inspired by the latest research, facts, and practical lifestyle tips about eating well for optimal fertility, helping you cut through the confusion and myths to take back some of the control on your fertility journey, one bite at a time. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Fertility Friendly Food, the podcast. I'm Steph. I'm an expert fertility dietitian and nutritionist and founder of The Dietologist. And today we have a special guest. We have Isabella Gosling, who is the founder of Let's Talk Period Australia and also a registered nurse. And welcome, Isabella.
Thanks for having me, Steph. I'm super excited to be here finally.
Yes. So I've been on Izzy's podcast before, Let's Talk Period. If you haven't checked it out, please go and check that out. We're doing a little podcast swap, aren't we?
I love it.
Yeah, me too. So for those who don't know who you are, can you introduce yourself? Because I always feel like guests introduce themselves better than I ever could introduce them.
Well, I will do my best. So I'm Isabella. I am a registered nurse, as you said. I'm also a registered teacher as well. I started off as a teacher and then have recently become an RN as well. So health stuff just interested me more. So decided to go down that pathway. And then, as Steph said as well, I am the founder of Let's Talk Period, which is a podcast and a community for people who are living with endo, adeno, PCOS, or just chronic illness in general. Like, we've got some people who've got Crohn's disease in the community, people with diabetes. So just a, well-rounded, holistic community just for people who get it and know what it's like living with chronic illness. And I myself have endo and adeno as well, and so that all sort of came about through my lived experience and wanting to find community and trying to help people. So that's a bit about me.
I didn't know you were a registered teacher. That's a fun fact I didn't know.
Yeah. I just apparently love uni.
Yeah. Well, you're like a professional educator then, technically, so yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you have both endometriosis and adenomyosis, and as a dietitian in this space of endo and adeno and reproductive health, I get a lot of questions about, navigating life with multiple chronic illness diagnoses, even though they're very, cousins of. But I wanted to get somebody on the pod who could talk about their experiences of navigating both and some of the nuances in that. And I guess as well, please feel free to tell your story, but I know you've got this amazing community who share their experiences as well. So if there's any kind of themes that you want to draw out from the collective, that would be awesome as well.
Yeah, sure. So yes, as I said, and you've said now, I do have endo and adeno, and truth be told, I had no idea what adenomyosis was until I got diagnosed with it myself. I'd heard endo float about for a little bit, and my mum said it to me when I was 14. She was like, I hope you don't have endometriosis. She was like, I'm sure that's not it. We'll get it all sorted. And then I didn't really hear about it till I'd had a laparoscopy and was told by the gynae that I saw that I didn't have endometriosis. And then I was absolutely certain that I actually did have endo. And so it's a very long-winded roundabout story, which I guess is the case for so many people. And that's a common theme that I see when I interview guests on the podcast who've got endo themselves, or when I have people write for the journal. Everybody seems to have that lengthy delay to diagnosis and getting someone to actually listen to them. So that's just one common theme. Even if you're only dealing with one diagnosis, that's something common in itself. And then having to try and find out if you've got something else wrong with you and get another diagnosis, that's another challenge afterwards, I guess. So I thankfully was diagnosed with endo and adeno at the same time, so I didn't have to push for a secondary diagnosis and keep trying to figure out what was going on. My gynae actually realised when he was doing the surgery that, you've actually got both. So that was good, because I know there's a lot of people that get diagnosed with endo and then have some of the symptoms of adenomyosis but don't actually know the differences between the two because, as you said, they are cousins, and so they can sort of overlap, and it's not until you really start to dig deep and do the detective work that you figure out, actually, I might also have adenomyosis as well, or, hey, this doesn't fit, maybe I've also got PCOS or something like that. So it is challenging, and you do have to be a bit of a detective yourself and advocate for yourself a lot. So that's another common theme, I guess.
Yes, I talk a lot about advocating for yourself in my clients and just in the community in general. I think as healthcare professionals, which we both are, this comes, it's not easy, but it's easier than perhaps somebody who isn't as equipped to traverse the health system and perhaps has a little bit of, not fear, but reservation about challenging a healthcare professional's opinion and or pushing for more tests or asking questions, and not even knowing what questions to ask. It's not even asking questions. It's just not even knowing what questions to ask to take that next step. And that is one of the things that I feel a lot of people do get really stuck with and often need a guide and a support person that does know how to navigate the health system to help them along.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And, doctors are considered to be the experts, and obviously they've done so much training, they've got so much knowledge, and, they do know so much. But also you are so within your right to question and ask why they're doing something. And if they're a good health professional, they should be more than happy to explain their thinking to you and explain why they're wanting to do this test or what they're doing and what it means, because as health professionals, we do just sort of go into that lingo we know, and it's gibberish to so many other people. And so stopping and going like, hey, I actually don't know what that means. If they're a good health professional, they shouldn't have a problem taking a step back, explaining, and not being cranky or annoyed that you're asking questions or wanting to actually figure out what they're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, like I said, being a healthcare professional, and many of our listeners and my clients are nurses and healthcare professionals. And I think there is a unique perspective being a healthcare professional and having a chronic health condition or multiple chronic health needs. And then you're also looking after others. It's a very unique situation to be in, because sometimes you are looking after people with the same disease as you, and then you're also looking after people with other conditions whilst you're also trying to look after yourself. It's a very interesting dynamic. And so I would love to have you share a little bit about how you navigate that, because I think that would be a really interesting and unique perspective.
I'm going to bring in good old TikTok because I've seen a TikTok recently, and I think it's very relatable to you, me, and any other health professionals listening. It's if you're a healthcare professional, what have you done to care for yourself today? Because you're caring for other people all day, every day. And that's whether you're living with a chronic illness as a health professional or not. But even more so if you are, because generally one of the symptoms of a chronic illness can be that fatigue. And if you're working 0.8 to full time, that's a lot in itself. So making sure you're doing those things to look after yourself. So for me, it's making sure I try and get a massage every fortnight at least, trying to find those things that, give back to you a little bit. I find that helpful. And then just from the flip side of that, I was working on a surgical ward recently for a few months, and I would have lots of patients back who have had a laparoscopy for endometriosis, and I would get to look after them post-operatively. And I just found that to be such a privilege and so special, because I have been that person in the bed who's just found out they've got endo, and being able to be on the other side of that, because I know the nurses who looked after me when I was first diagnosed, I was so thankful. And so being able to be that for someone else is so special in itself. So it is a really interesting place to be in. So I think putting yourself into the shoes of other people is really helpful. And then also making sure you're taking that time to give back to yourself, because you are giving to others so much throughout the day.
Yeah. I think that just speaks to, I think I posted a TikTok recently and it was like point of view inside the brain of somebody with endometriosis. And it had that like Joe Rogan voice. It's like, blah, 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 blah. And on the screen I had like, I'll link it in the show notes, but it was like, I got to make a doctor's appointment. Should I get surgery? Will I need IVF? Did gluten make my belly bloat? Yeah. Was my poop normal today? Like, have I drunk enough water? I haven't done my pelvic physio exercises. So all this is going on in our brains as to people with endometriosis. And then you've also got all those things for your clients or patients or whatever. And you're also thinking that at the same time. Yeah. And then we wonder why we're tired because it's not just a physical fatigue symptom, but there's also that mental fatigue element of living life with a chronic illness is there's just more, there's more on your plate.
Definitely. Yeah. And my beautiful friend Danielle, she didn't coin the term, but she first introduced it to me, and she's a nurse as well. She's over in the UK at the moment, and she has endo and adeno and POTS. So she was talking about chronic illness as being like a third shift, because you have like your first shift, which is all of your home jobs that you've got to get done, and like, you know, making sure the washing's up to date, having food, you know, doing exercise, all of the stuff to keep you running at home. And then you've got your second shift, which is you going to work to make the money and like, you know, get some social interaction, work your brain, do what you love, hypothetically. And then the third shift is navigating your chronic illness and like, oh, I've got to make this appointment. I've got to go to the doctor. I've got to go to the chemist. I've got to go to the pelvic physio. I've got to do my pelvic floor physio exercises. So it's just like there's more things. And so that was very helpful when she told me about that a couple of years ago. I was like, wow, that just makes so much sense.
I love that. I was introduced to a similar concept by a coach that I worked with who was also a psychologist, and she introduced the concept of a capacity pie, which is like every day we wake up and we all each have 100%, but like my 100% and your 100% probably a little bit different, but what occupies that 100% is going to be unique. So like your first shift stuff, like your home stuff, for somebody who has a chronic illness, that might take 30 to 40% of your capacity to get done. And then you go to work and that might take 60% of your capacity. You come home, you've only got 0 to 10% to give to.
Your pie is full. It's gone.
Your pie is full. Yeah. And then you still have to like maintain your relationships. You know, if you want to try and exercise. If you're paying attention to a particular project, or, you know, you're working on your nutrition or something like that, like something that requires extra effort than like the baseline, you know, that's all capacity. So sometimes I see people, and especially people that book in with discovery calls for me with endometriosis, and they're acutely unwell. Like they're acutely unwell in terms of pain, or, you know, they've recently been hospitalized or they're in and out of hospitals. And I just say to them, I'm just like, nutrition is not in your season right now. Like, I appreciate you want to get help, but like, you've got no capacity to implement. And I say that in a compassionate and kind way, but like I'm hearing what's going on for you, and there's just no way that nutrition is practical for you right now. And then you're going to get frustrated that you've spent time, money, and energy on something that you're unable to do. You're only going to get frustrated with yourself, and that's not great either. So let's not even start. Let's come back to this when things are a bit more settled in the pain.
Yeah, let's revisit.
Yeah, let's revisit. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I always talk about managing chronic health in like seasons, if you can. And then like once you've gone through your seasons of focus of, you know, maybe you're focusing like right now, my season is like movement. So I'm focusing on pelvic health and exercise and stuff like that. And then I went through a season where I was focusing on medical, and I went through a season focusing on nutrition, and went through a season of fertility. I'll be going through a fertility season with egg freezing, like all that kind of stuff. You can break it down, and then you can get to a maintenance mode when you're not pushing forward on everything. And I think that really helps structuring it like that.
Oh, for sure. I could not agree more. And like the frustration thing is so real, because like when I was first diagnosed, I was like, oh, I've got to eat gluten-free, I've got to eat dairy-free, I've got to get rid of all the plastic in my house, I've got to change all of my beauty products, I've got to exercise all the time, I've got to not be in pain, and like you just get so overwhelmed. And so that seasons approach is so beneficial. And I do a similar thing. Like right now I'm working with an osteopath regularly, and previously I was doing pelvic floor physio, and like it's sort of like once you're at that maintenance phase, as you said, you can sort of move on and take the things that you've learnt from each season and keep them up without having to do that intense thinking about them all the time. They just become part of your routine.
Yes, exactly right. And I think you need to wait for it to become part of your routine before you move on to the next thing to really avoid, like, you're still going to feel overwhelmed, but to avoid the like mass overwhelm.
Oh, yeah, you can't be doing everything all at once because then you're just doing a disservice to yourself.
No, absolutely. What are some of your favourite tips that you've heard or you'd like to share with our listeners about navigating life with multiple diagnoses like endo and adeno or other chronic conditions?
I think bringing someone to an appointment with you is really helpful if you can. Like, I know during COVID that was sort of not allowed, so even if you could check, like I know the case for me, like we're still not allowed support people at appointments in some circumstances in Queensland. Even if you just check with your healthcare provider, hey, am I allowed to phone this person in and have them listen? Because you can get, like, I think this is the theme, you can get overwhelmed when you're in an appointment and you might forget what was said at the appointment, or you might forget to ask questions because you are in that bit of that fight, flight, freeze sort of mode. And having that person there, either in person or on the phone, to sort of just remember what the appointment was about, remember things that you might forget, and just bring things up that you might forget to ask or you might not want to ask, because as you said, it can be really tricky to challenge or even just question healthcare professionals themselves. Just having that support person is really helpful, and especially if you're young. Like, I was going through all of this for the first time when I was 18, 19, and I didn't get diagnosed till I was 21, and I was still bringing my mum to appointments until I was like 23. So having someone with you is just so important, I think, and it doesn't have to be your mum. It can be anybody that you know that you trust and has your back. The next one would be those who matter, like, don't mind. Those who mind don't matter, which is sort of falls into that support person sort of thing again. The amount of people that like you might lose because of chronic illness can be really hard to face, and like I've lost friendships because of it, but the people who don't get it, you don't really want in your life anyway, and the people who do get it are there for you. And like some of my friendships I wouldn't have made if I didn't have endometriosis and adenomyosis. So I think leaning into those spaces can be really helpful sometimes, and just trying to find those people that you can go to who get it, and you can just have a vent and they'll be there for you. So like that's another tip, I guess. So finding those who are there for you and sort of not giving weight or, you know, space in your mind to the people who don't get it, because they aren't going to get it and unless they want to, and you can try, but if they're not wanting to come to the party, come to the table, you know, it's not going to happen. So that's like support-wise. And then I know lots of people are worried about, like, am I going to always feel like this? And, like, that overwhelming sense of doom, like, this is how I'm feeling right now. This is going to be what it's like for forever. How am I going to make it through this? Like, you will get better. I'm not saying there's a cure for endo or adeno or any of the chronic illnesses that you're living with, but it might be particularly bad at that moment in time. But I like the seasons analogy as well. This could be a particularly rough season, but you will come out the other side of that, and there is light at that end of the tunnel, and you will get back to sort of feeling that baseline normal self again in some capacity, because when there's down, you can only be down for so long, and then you come back up again and you do all those things to make yourself feel better, and there is that light. So I think those are my 3 things.
Yes. I love the support person stuff, because especially if you have a tendency to get a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit off track in a consultation, in the sense that the healthcare professional takes over. And because as a healthcare professional, like, there's certain information that we need to like do our job, right? So there's certain questions that I always ask. There's certain things I'm going to explore. There's certain things that I'm going to dive down deep into. But before I even start, I always ask this question, which is, what do you absolutely want me to do today? What do you absolutely want me to cover today, if I can? And so if we get off track, I can come back to that and be like, okay, I know today you really want this. So let's see if that's like possible in the context of what we know now. And I think that really helps. But I think having a support person, especially somebody who perhaps might have a little bit of a different personality to you, I think that is always really helpful. Somebody who maybe is a bit like, if you're a bit more withdrawn or you find it hard to challenge that kind of authoritative figure, bring like your most outspoken friend who holds nothing back. Just bring that friend with you, and and let them know like what your concerns are. Like, hey, if this appointment gets a little bit off track, here's my list of questions that I was hoping to get answered. Like, can you like help me get these all ticked off together? And I think that stuff always helps. And I think the other thing that you can always do as well, and I think this is something that we do here at the Dietologist, but I know not all healthcare professionals do, but you can take notes, but you can also ask for your healthcare professional to send you your notes. Like, we send our note, like what we cover with our clients, in an email afterwards. So you have it there, because in the moment you can go, yep, I understand. And as soon as that call ends, or as soon as that appointment ends and you walk out of that waiting room, you're like, oh my God, what just happened? I don't even know what's going on. And so I've engineered into our service, like having that available so that, even in 6 months' time, you can refer back to that and go, oh yeah, that's right. I need to be focusing on A, B, C, D in my diet, or whatever it is. But I think that just really helps. And especially like for my clients, like with brain fog and, those types of symptoms where that's really easy to happen. So having, you take notes is one thing, but that's like a lot of process to do. But asking your doctor to write down, or your healthcare professional write down, the key takeaway things that you need to do from today and give it to you.
I love that. And I think like I've had nutritionists and naturopaths who've done that previously. I've never had a doctor send me a follow-up note, but anyway, that would be amazing. But you can get your like health record sent to you. That's so true. But I think it's such a great way to just summarize everything, because even if you are trying to take those notes, as you said, like you can't really write down at the same speed as someone's talking to you, and then you're probably missing bits of info, and you're not